Hardy's getting set up, I'm just going to introduce Hardy. So Hardy Schwamm joined NUI Galway in August 2019 as the Open Scholarship Librarian. Hardy's originally from Germany and has worked for more than 10 years in open scholarship related roles in the north of England and led the scholarly communications team at Lancaster University before moving to Ireland. So Hardy, thank you for joining us today. And Hardy's going to talk to us on the title of Learn, Share and Discuss the Open Scholarship Community Galway and Culture Change. So I'll hand over to you now, Hardy, and thank you.
Right, thanks for the introduction. And just getting ready here. So yeah, hello everyone. So my talk actually touches upon and connects with a lot of points that Michelle has already mentioned. So I hope it complements it pretty well. So as you can see, my talk is called Learn, Share, Discuss, and I will try to convince you why and how open scholarship communities, in our case, the Open Scholarship Community Galway, can help with culture change. And I can start kind of with the end, which is the vision that we all share, which is that in the not so distant future, we live in a world where open practices are embedded in the research and publication cycle, where all scientific research will be freely available to people within and outside of academia, and where eventually we can drop open altogether because research is open by default. But how do we get there? I mean, how do things change? How does a large group like researchers collectively change their behavior? And I think there is surprisingly little thought from stakeholders on how this might work from a cultural perspective. Now, one thing funders seem to acknowledge, at least, is the importance of research culture and culture change. And Michelle also mentioned culture change as well, so I'm happy to see that. So here you can see one example from the EU Commission's Open Science Policy. And it says, open science relies on the combined effects of technological development and cultural change. And you can find similar statements from many other funders. So a more kind of local example here is a quote from Science Foundation Ireland's 2020 agenda. Science is a culture. It enriches our minds. It provides a reliable method for analysis, debate, and resolution of problems. And here you can see just a couple of examples showing more evidence on the need for cultural change in relation to open scholarship and open science. And now here, these are two opinion pieces arguing for culture change and from the last couple of years. But how does culture change? So I find it helpful to work with a culture change model, and the one I like most comes from the Center for Open Science in the US. And according to this model, there are 5 layers that work together to stimulate change of culture. And you can see them here on the left. There are policies, incentives, communities, user experience, and infrastructures. And you can see what the effect these layers have on the right-hand side. And it is the communities in the center here who make change the norm. So which of these 5 layers have been the most important one for funders and universities? Well, I guess we can agree that policies are the layer most considered, as well as probably to a lesser extent, infrastructure. The central part of the pyramid, the communities, they often get overlooked and to me seems under-supported. And in my opinion, this could offer an opportunity for libraries. So what is an open scholarship community that can help with that culture change? Well, such a community needs to be researcher-led and bottom-up, inclusive of all disciplines. Open scholarship communities organize, promote, and facilitate open events, but they also build personal and professional networks. They make open scholarship more visible and over time, the norm within their discipline. OSCs create a learning environment where scholars can acquire the skills to conduct open, transparent, and reliable research. So maybe this is a good time for a little interlude. So what is open scholarship? Some of you might not be too familiar with the concept, although Michelle kind of just introduced it as well. But in our understanding, open scholarship is an umbrella term for a wide range of open practices. And here we use the image of the 8 pillars of open scholarship adapted from the European Commission. And I don't need to go into detail here, but it is important that we define open scholarship broadly as open outputs and open practices. And yes, this of course includes open access and open data, but also citizen science, rewards, and open education. Yeah, and one of the main benefits of open scholarship links to today's topic. It makes collaboration possible and easy. But back to communities. So where did this idea of an open scholarship community originate? It all started in the Netherlands. Our Dutch friends have come up with the concept of the what they call the open science communities. And as you can see here, there are currently 11 of them, from Groningen up north to Maastricht in the south of the country. And together, they have more than 700 members. If we zoom out of the map, you can see there are currently 2 open scholarship communities outside the Netherlands. And there's one collaborative one in Sweden, and then the other one, the dot on the west of Europe, that's the Open Scholarship Community Galway. But the first, and to my knowledge, most developed one is the Open Science Community in Utrecht. And the initiative started with 2 researchers called Anita Erland and Luc Brinkman, one from linguistics and one from psychology. And they are really true rock stars, I have to say. In early 2018, they started their OSC as a grassroots initiative in their own time and with their own money, even to cover initial costs like running a website. And they later partnered with Utrecht University Library. So we liked the Dutch community idea, but how can we adapt that to our environment in Galway? So first, we had a close look at the very useful Start Your Own OSC guide written by Anita and Luc. In 10 points, they present a useful step-by-step guide that we used in our planning. So here you can see a shortened version of this 10-step guide. And in orange, you can see the steps we in Galway have already taken or we are working on, and the white ones are for the longer term. So, and I will highlight some of the steps that I think are particularly important. So the first one is to find open scholarship enthusiasts at your institution. At NUI Galway, these enthusiasts do exist, but they are often individuals, not groups, and they're not connected beyond institutional divisions or their small research groups. Initially, I had discussions with a dozen or so enthusiasts and introduced them to the idea of starting a community. I found these enthusiasts by recommendations from my library colleagues, but I also searched our researchers' publications for the keyword open to identify academics who publish on open issues. So why are these early enthusiasts so important? So we know from technical and other innovations that you need a group of innovators and early adopters to get a critical mass where innovation can reach the mainstream. And you might be familiar with the Rogers bell curve here on the right-hand side. In the current transitional period, we do need enthusiasts to make open scholarship more visible and accessible. So it is easy for researchers who are new to open scholarship to adopt its values and practices. The next important step was to create a visual identity. So that is a logo and a website, Twitter account. And our new friends in Utrecht were kind enough to design a logo that visually links us with the Dutch communities. The next action, which is the step 4 on Utrecht's guide, that was an important one. So I asked people to sign up to the new community and put their name, and as you can see here, their picture to it. Our success so far, we have more than 60 people signed up to our community mailing list, and 25 want to be seen as members on our website. Who are our members? They are mainly mid-career researchers, but just recently we had a number of PhD students and postdocs joining us. And like in other open science communities in the Netherlands, we have psychology well represented, but we do have members across our campus and also including the library and other support staff. Right, this is step 7 on the Utrecht guide, and this is clearly where our community has been most active. So we had our first meeting in November last year, and you can see here some examples of the 7 open scholarship cafes we had so far. And again, we understand open scholarship as an umbrella term for lots of open practices. So we had events on a number of topics, and I will just kind of show you in a list form what they were. So, so these topics, you know, they are kind of suggested and run by community members, so they reflect our members' interests. And you can see here that we've done sessions on finding, open educational resources, open software and tools, open innovation, open finances, blockchain and open business models, producing open educational resources and how to comply with Plan S. And the last one on Plan S, the library, and actually happens next week on Friday the 13th. And if anyone is interested, please register and join us. It's open to all. So back to the Utrecht step-by-step guide. So they mentioned a big kickoff event, and we officially launched our community during the Open Scholarship Week in mid-May this year. And one of the highlights of that event was the keynote from the Open Science Coordinator at Rotterdam University, highlighting their own community experiences so far. And it was a week of talks and workshops and was put together by the Open Scholarship community members. The library provided some help in the logistics, but the program was crowdsourced from our community. And we just established, actually last week, a committee of 7 community members who started thinking about the Open Scholarship next year, 2021. So, and finally, I'd like to zoom out again and talk about Open Scholarship communities collaborating internationally. So for us, it's very encouraging to see other communities grow and do exciting things. We also have worked together on a white paper on open communities, which is now available as a preprint. And we share resources on the Open Science Framework, and we have worked on a shared code of conduct. So what have we learned so far? Our community has been active for 12 months now, organizing cafes and our Open Scholarship Week. So we have a wider group of 60 people engaged and connected, and about a dozen of them probably are active currently in organizing events. We also have some recognition from senior management, and I would say we have had a certain momentum. And we also connected with the Dutch open science communities and have contributed to the white paper I mentioned. Well, but what are the challenges? So one is the question why the library is involved in building these communities. So in my views, these communities do need a partner who can help with regular support and some staff time. Libraries share values with open scholarship communities, and we have a stake in many open practices, as we've heard this morning. It is a challenging balance between library involvement and researcher-led action. The long-term vision is that such a community mostly runs itself, but obviously we're nowhere near that. And of course, in COVID times, we are working with virtual communities where some of the benefits of community experience, the cups of coffee or the slices of pizza, they're not available at the moment. And it is a challenge to keep up the momentum. But yeah, in summary, we believe that an open scholarship community is an important step towards culture change. And it is one where libraries can play an important role. And I'm curious to see how these OSCs will develop in the coming months, and if any new ones will emerge in Ireland or the UK. And just last week, to finish off here, the OSC starter kit has been published. This is an update and an expanded version of the Utrecht guide I mentioned, and should help anyone who likes the open scholarship community idea. Right, and that is me. Thanks for listening, and here are my details if you want to get in touch.
Hardy, thank you so much. That was really interesting and perfectly timed as well. Thank you.
You're unmuted. I can't hear you, sorry.
No, I'm unmuted.
Oh.
Can you hear me now?
Sorry, that was my fault. I'm back.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. We were doing so well. I was hoping we weren't going to encounter technical difficulties at this stage. So I'm going to, sorry, I'm just saying, sorry, there is a question, I think. Let me just go into chat. So I'm just reading a question. It's in chat rather than Q&A from Mick. Yes, so Mick is just asking which was something that was in my mind as well, how could other universities set up open scholarship communities? What are the benefits of doing so, and to what extent could libraries get involved? And actually my question that I had, Hardy, kind of tags onto that as well, in the sense that I was wondering, and you did answer it towards the end, is it the case that you see these open scholarship communities as being library-led? Do they originate with the library, or is it a partnership with the library? And then there's mixed questions about what other universities should do in that regard. Okay,
let's start with, should it be library-led? And the answer is no. I think it should really come from the academic community. Okay. And I see the library, as I mentioned, I see us as a partner. And just as an example from other open science communities in the Netherlands, they have somewhere, they have people like myself in a similar role, but they also have different models. For example, I mentioned Rotterdam. They have an open science coordinator. I think that's his job title. And he is based in the research office. So that's another way of offering support. I think these open scholarship communities, they need a helping hand, as I mentioned, for a lot of the legwork that needs to be done, a little bit of resourcing as well. And I think this is where the library can kind of be really a good friend of these communities. But it is a difficult balance, I have to admit that, because it's very tempting to just push in our views and interests into these communities. And if you want to start one, I think top tip would be to find 3, 4, 5 enthusiasts that sign up to this idea, that sign up to say, the first couple of events, we come up with topics, and we come up with speakers, and we show some enthusiasm. Now, this is something most of the libraries involved today probably are already doing, but they're not doing it under a brand. So in a way, I think these communities are also a branding issue. I mean, that sounds a bit cynical, but I think it connects all the activities that are already ongoing. And what I love about them is that they connect across campus. And this is also, I mean, the good and bad thing about open science and open scholarship, it's so broad that, maybe I'll stop here and leave some of the thoughts for the later discussion.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's excellent, Hardy. Really interesting what you said about the idea of 3 or 4 maybe enthusiasts partnering up, and it not being necessarily, and in fact, you said definitively not directed by the library. And just as a comment in the question and answer section from Mary Walsh, who says that your talk was very interesting, and that she feels it sounds like OSCG is on a roll, which I think it certainly does. It seems like you've made a huge amount of progress in a short amount of time. I think it's really interesting what you say about the fact that one of the key things you're doing is providing a branding for initiatives that might take place anyway, but now they're being grouped and identified in some way.
Yeah, that's certainly the correct. And that's actually also a good starting point. You might do some of these things already. So it's it's maybe not as daring or as scary as it maybe sounds.
Great. And I'm just in the chat, Mick is just mentioning that in Ulster, they have just launched an open research, open science framework, and that they're trying to engage with interested researchers. So early days. So it sounds like what you've described would be very, very useful. Just before we leave this section, if anybody would like to ask a question directly to Hardy that we haven't covered so far, if you want to unmute and ask that question, that would be fine. Okay, and if not, I just unfortunately missed a couple of questions that were asked for Michelle. Jane, if you'd like to unmute, and my apologies for missing your question the last time. You had an interesting question for Michelle's talk in the last one, if you'd like to put that to Michelle.
Yeah, it was just a question about sort of embedding openness and sort of open practices in the curriculum, but whether you thought it lent itself to some disciplines better than others. I mean, you know, is it something you can talk about easier with scientists, because you can talk about reproducing results and the need for open science, or creative subjects? I don't know if Michelle's got any thoughts she'd like to share, because I'm quite interested in the disciplinary differences.
Sure, and that has been kind of a traditional challenge. I think that some disciplines have tended to engage more because I guess it is easier in one sense. But I think what's really important, I'm a firm believer that openness applies to all disciplines. It's just that it might look a little bit different. And I think it's really important that we, you know, involve the research communities with the different disciplines to drive and design what openness looks like for their discipline and what's meaningful for their discipline. And it will look different, you know, it won't be reproducing results in a lab, but I think even in arts and humanities, you know, we see how making cultural heritage objects openly accessible and, you know, text and data mining, you know, opens up new ways to undertake digital scholarship. So I think it's just as important, it's just it might look a little bit different.
Great. Thank you very much, Michelle, and thanks, Jane. That's an excellent question. And we were just about out of time for this section before I hand back to Jane to do the panel part, but there's one further question. Mary has a question for Hardy, asking, at the moment, does he personally, or perhaps the library, but probably yourself personally, have to manage the group, given that it's not self-driven at the moment?
The answer is probably yes. I think without me and my kind of the time that I'm allowed to dedicate to this, I think it would probably not it would not run itself. I'm also nudging people to do stuff, you know, and I'm the central point for communication at the moment. That is certainly true. And I think that is the role that we can play. But again, it connects with so many things we're already doing that I don't, you know, if you ask me how much of my time I put into this, it's hard to quantify, because some of the things I'm doing anyway. And so it's difficult to quantify. But yes, I think at the moment we're still in a stage, especially with no face-to-face meetings and no, you know, the dynamics you get from face-to-face meetings. I'm the one driving it.
Great. Thank you very much, Hardy. And thanks again to both Hardy and Michelle for two excellent talks there. I'm going to hand back over to Jane now, who's going to